What's the one thing we're not talking about, but we really should be?
Well, politically, to me, I think the dirty war on Syria has not gotten nearly enough attention. And the way it's been described in the Western media, especially in the British media and the US media, is a scandal. The US and its allies spent billions of dollars on a dirty war in Syria, which, in the words of Joe Biden, ultimately benefited Al Qaeda and ISIS. He blurted this out in a comment in 2014, which he later had to apologize for. But he was telling the truth. And the picture we got in the Western media was just not accurate as to what was actually going on. We really helped destroy the country. And now Syrians cannot rebuild their country because the US is overseeing what's called the Caesar sanctions, which explicitly targets Syria's reconstruction. The US openly brags that it's destroying Syria's economy through these sanctions and preventing it from rebuilding. And meanwhile, this is in parallel with the US occupying still militarily a third of Syria, which also does not get very much attention. So I think the US efforts to destroy Syria along with its allies, including the UK, should get far more attention. And at minimum, we should be lifting these murderous sanctions that are preventing a country that we helped destroy from rebuilding. And I hope people give that much more attention, along with a scandal that I've been covering very closely at the Gray Zone and the Nation magazine, which is that as a part of this dirty war, to impose sanctions on Syria and to justify foreign aggression against it. Syria has been accused of carrying out these chemical weapons attacks. And you can go through every incident and there's sketchy evidence in all the big cases. But the most glaring one is the case of Douma in 2018, April 2018, where Syria was accused of a chemical weapons attack. The US, Britain, and France bombed Syria. But then there's been this scandal in the OPCW, the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons, which actually went to Douma, to Syria, to investigate this. And a whole series of leaks show that internally, the inspectors who went to Douma did not find evidence of a chemical weapons attack, but their evidence was suppressed. Their initial report was doctored, and the OPCW put out a report that was completely misleading and contradicted what its own inspectors had found. And this coincided with the US effort to pressure the OPCW to come to a conclusion that happened to match the US narrative that Syria was guilty of a chlorine attack. So that is a global scandal where basically, similar to what we saw before the Iraq War, the US is compromising the OPCW to basically doctor claims that justify US warmongering, that justify a bombing of Syria and now justify sanctions. And there are whistleblowers inside the OPCW who have challenged this, who deserve our support and certainly our attention, because try to find a reference to this in the US or UK media, and it's very, very hard to find. A few people have covered it. Peter Hitchens of the Daily Mail has covered it. I've covered it at the Gray Zone. Jonathan Steele, the veteran British correspondent, has covered it. But aside from that, it does not get very much attention. And there was just a new development where there was an open letter just published. It's available at the Courage Foundation, couragefound.org. And it's a statement by a whole bunch of signatories, including Noam Chomsky, Daniel Ellsberg, Lawrence Wilkerson, who served as the chief of staff to Colin Powell, Tulsi Gabbard, as well as 5 former OPCW officials voicing support for the whistleblowers and urging the OPCW to stop silencing them and to let them air the suppressed scientific findings from their own investigation. So I hope people pay attention to that story. And if they're interested, there's a lot more they can find about it at thegrayzone.com.